World War I didn't just end a conflict, it destroyed entire empires. In 1917, the Russian Empire collapsed under the pressure of war and revolution. This power vacuum led to the rise of the Soviet Union, a new communist state that would shape global politics for decades. A year later, in 1918, the Austro-Hungarian Empire dissolved. What was once a single empire fractured into independent nations, including Austria, Hungary, and Czechoslovakia. But these new borders were unstable, planting the seeds for future conflict. Germany followed the same path. In 1918, the German Empire collapsed, forcing Kaiser Wilhelm II to abdicate. He was replaced by the Weimar Republic, a fragile democracy born out of defeat. And finally, the Ottoman Empire. After centuries of rule, it officially collapsed in 1922, following its defeat in the war. Its fall led to the creation of the Republic of Turkey and the redrawing of the Middle East. Consequences still felt today. After World War I, the Allies imposed a peace treaty on Germany that would shape the rest of the century. The Treaty of Versailles was designed to punish. It crippled Germany's economy, shattered its military, and humiliated a nation that had once been a European power. Germany was forced to pay enormous reparations, 132 billion gold marks. That was around 33 billion US dollars at the time, and the equivalent of over 500 billion today. The financial strain triggered hyperinflation, wiping out savings and destroying the German middle class. Then came the War Guilt Clause. Article 231 forced Germany to accept full responsibility for starting the war, a claim many Germans deeply resented. The German army was reduced to just 100,000 men. Conscription was banned. Tanks and an air force were outlawed. The navy was heavily restricted, and the border with France was demilitarized. To many Germans, this wasn't peace. It was a dictated settlement, a diktat, that stripped the country of dignity and power. These punishments weakened Germany's new Weimar government. And in a nation facing poverty, humiliation, and instability, extremist promises became dangerously appealing. The treaty was meant to prevent another war. Instead, it helped create the conditions for the next one. In the years after World War I, much of Europe was unstable, angry, and disillusioned. The rise of fascism was driven by economic collapse, political chaos, and a deep loss of faith in democracy. In Germany, resentment toward the Treaty of Versailles ran deep. Many blamed it for economic suffering, national humiliation, and the collapse of social order. Fear also played a role. The Russian Revolution had shown that communism could overthrow governments, and many Germans feared the same fate. Economic crises made everything worse. Hyperinflation destroyed savings, and the Great Depression of 1929 caused mass unemployment and social unrest. Germany's young Weimar Republic struggled to control the chaos. To many citizens, democracy seemed weak, divided, and incapable of restoring stability. In this environment, extremist solutions became attractive. Fascism promised order, unity, and national strength. It rejected democracy and instead embraced authoritarian leadership and aggressive nationalism. In Italy, these ideas were championed by Benito Mussolini, who presented fascism as a cure for weakness and decline. Across Europe, millions turned to leaders who promised certainty in an uncertain world, even if it meant giving up freedom. World War I didn't just destroy empires, it redrew the map of Europe. With the collapse of the German, Austro-Hungarian, and Ottoman empires, dozens of new nations were created almost overnight. Countries like Poland, Czechoslovakia, and Yugoslavia emerged from the ruins of empire. But these borders were often drawn by diplomats, not by the people who lived there. Ethnic, cultural, and religious realities were ignored. Millions found themselves trapped inside countries they did not identify with. These regions became unstable shatter zones, areas filled with tension, resentment, and unresolved national claims. Instead of bringing stability, the new borders created fresh conflicts, and many of these tensions would explode just 2 decades later. The conflict marked the shift from outdated 19th century tactics to 20th century industrialized warfare. Early in the war, modern weapons met old strategies, and the result was catastrophe. Machine guns, artillery, and barbed wire made traditional open-field charges suicidal. To survive, soldiers were forced to dig in. This led to trench warfare, a deadly stalemate stretching hundreds of miles across Europe. The battlefield itself became industrialized. Machine guns like the Maxim could fire hundreds of rounds per minute, dominating entire areas of land. Heavy artillery bombarded enemy positions for days at a time, reshaping landscapes into wastelands. In 1916, tanks were introduced by the British in an attempt to break the stalemate. These armored vehicles could cross trenches and withstand machine gun fire, signaling the future of mechanized warfare. Chemical weapons added a new layer of terror. Poison gases, such as chlorine and mustard gas, forced the development of gas masks and permanently changed the rules of combat. War also expanded beyond the battlefield. Aircraft evolved from simple reconnaissance tools into fighters and bombers. Airships were even used to bomb cities, bringing war directly to civilian populations. At sea, German submarines targeted merchant and naval ships, introducing unrestricted submarine warfare and dragging neutral nations closer to the conflict. World War I became a total war. Entire economies were mobilized. Factories, propaganda, and civilian labor, including women working in munitions plants, became as vital as soldiers at the front. By the end of the war, combat was faster, deadlier, and more technologically driven than ever before. The foundations of modern warfare had been laid. World War I didn't create peace. It created an unstable and volatile pause. The Treaty of Versailles punished Germany without addressing the deeper causes of conflict. Instead of reconciliation, it left behind resentment, humiliation, and anger. Out of that anger emerged extremist ideologies. In Germany, nationalism and fascism promised to overturn the post-war order and restore lost pride. One man capitalized on this resentment. Adolf Hitler rose to power by promising to tear the Treaty of Versailles apart, and millions followed him. World War I ended the fighting. But it left behind the conditions for something even worse. And 20 years later, the world would pay the price. In the next video, I'll be breaking down the consequences of World War II. If you'd like to see that when it's out, consider subscribing.